There we are, live on video. Meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. So hello, all you Facebook listeners in IX Leadership Land. We are trying this new thing so we can actually bring other experts to the table and talk about the things that they know about. And so I think this is actually working. It says we're live on Facebook, so it must be. Okay, today we have with us Peggy O'Sullivan. She is a healthcare expert and in a leadership role. Has had a background primarily in healthcare in hospitals, emergency rooms, operating rooms, baby rooms, all the rooms in the hospital. And really not only being on the floor and working as a nurse, but also working as a leader and getting what they call in the biz, secondary compassion fatigue and dealing with that. So we know there's a lot of you who are struggling with this, especially with COVID. Seems like there's lots of extra triggers lately. So we thought we'd bring in somebody to talk about it. So Peggy, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'll start off with just letting you know a little bit about myself. I've been a nurse for nearly 40 years and worked in rural hospitals as well as tertiary care centers in different areas of nursing. Of the 40 years, probably 20 plus has been in the surgery arena, but I did spend time working in emergency rooms, taking care of intensive care patients and labor and delivery. Not my favorite, but it's joyous when it's joyous, and when it's sad, it's super sad. But anyway, I do have quite a bit of experience in leadership. I have a master's in nursing administration, healthcare administration, and I've been a nursing leader for a couple of decades now too. So it's really fun. There's times in nursing that are really not fun. They're really hard. And we all suffer from different things, anywhere from burnout, compassion fatigue, and a lot of different things. So I usually start talking about compassion fatigue by identifying definitions. And compassion fatigue is really affects people whose professions lead to prolonged exposure to other people's trauma. And you suffer on behalf of those who are suffering. And that's really what the definition of compassion fatigue is. Compassion fatigue has been around since compassion has been around. It's that old. It's been around forever. We just didn't really give it a name until a couple of decades ago, really. In 1992, there was a lady by the name of Carla Joinson that described the negative impact that hospital nurses were experiencing as a result of their repeated daily exposure to patient emergencies. And so, and really when the term compassion fatigue came about, they were really exploring burnout in nursing. And that in the early 90s is when the shortage in nursing and acute care was really beginning to be noticed. Sometimes there's other things that we call compassion fatigue. We call that the cost of caring for people. And in the academic literature, the technical term is secondary traumatic stress disorder. We all have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. This is secondary traumatic stress disorder because you're suffering this distress by listening to other people's stories secondhand. So burnout, that's what a lot of nurses, when you talk to nurses or healthcare professionals or people in helping roles, they don't say, I have compassion fatigue. They say, I'm burned out. And so we really want to be clear about what the definitions are, because there's different ways to recognize and treat these syndromes. So burnout is really a physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress. And burnout's really related to the chronic tedium in careers and in the workplace, rather than your specific exposures to trauma. Compassion fatigue really speaks to the specific exposures. So you can have burnout in a role that's not really in traumatic situations when you're just tired of doing the same things over and over again. And then I always talk a little bit about empathy. When we all go to nursing school, we are taught to not be sympathetic to people, but to be empathetic with people. And that is the ability to understand and share the experiences. So, and when people are over empathetic, or if they already have burnout, those things that are untreated and unaddressed, that and compassion fatigue, that leads into depression or PTSD. So that's what you really have to watch out for. We have these syndromes that can really lead to clinical depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's probably many people in healthcare roles, even outside of nurses, that probably have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and don't even know that. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder probably in the early 2000s, and when the doctor told me that, I was like, that's for combat veterans, that's not us. And he goes, what do you think you guys are doing here? He said, it's like going to war a lot of the time. So that's something that I think that healthcare professionals need to be cognizant of. So what are some of the common signs and symptoms? And I'll just kind of list some of them. It's chronic exhaustion, chronic fatigue, emotional, physical, or both. Reduced feelings of sympathy or empathy. So when you don't care as much as you think you should or could care, or you have cared in the past. And I think a lot of healthcare professionals have experienced that, me included. And I have stories I could tell about that, where you have a code that comes into the emergency room, and instead of caring about that person, you're really more concerned about, should we call this a code blue or a code brown? Because there's some brown things going on there too, that experienced healthcare professionals know what I'm talking about. And so it's when you recognize that and stop caring, that's a big sign or symptom. So the other thing is dreading working or caring for those people. And a lot of times in the smaller hospitals, if you're the only nurse, the only RN, then you are the one, you're it. It doesn't matter if you care, if you can't even draw straws, like, oh God, do I have to go down there and take care of that patient again? And you have to, sometimes you just have to do it. But when you dread doing those things, that's a sign or symptom. When you're irritable, anger, have anxiety, depersonalization, I think goes along with the lack of empathy and sympathy. When you detach and depersonalize, and you put people's situations in a box that you seclude yourself from. Headaches, trouble sleeping, weight loss, impaired decision making, problems with personal relationships, poor work-life balance, which a lot of healthcare professionals suffer, is work-life balance. That's one of the reasons that people are driven out of healthcare and helping professions, especially nursing, and diminished sense of career fulfillment. So, do you have any thoughts or comments about signs or symptoms, Meg?
Yeah, not so much about signs or symptoms, but I'm curious what other, you had said earlier, you talked a little bit about people in helping industries. So what classifies really in your mind, or I don't know, maybe by actual industry language, like what classifies as a helping industry?
So there's other individuals that work in other helping professions, and some of those professions are child protection workers, teachers, social workers, palliative care workers, police officers, EMTs, even veterinarians and animal welfare workers suffer compassion fatigue when they are put into situations where they have to care for animals that are in distressful situations. Those are the kind of helping professions that I think of. It doesn't necessarily always need to be in an acute care hospital type setting. There's a lot of people that are in helping professions that are exposed to other people's emotional trauma, and they're at risk.
Yeah, I didn't even think teachers,
Teachers.
providers, good Lord.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to watch those kids leave knowing, I mean, COVID or not, but leave knowing that they don't have enough food for the weekend, or they're not gonna get to eat dinner, or,
Yeah.
so I
I
think
know.
there's other professions that are helping
Yeah.
professions.
Yeah, I know of teachers that have a lot of students that are on the, that's if we don't have school for a day, they know they're not going to get breakfast and lunch. And then, I know that they are worried about a lot of their students. I know a person that was a special ed teacher, and she's no longer doing that. She was really got involved in some of her kids' welfare and told a lot of sad stories about that. And she burned out. So yeah, it happens in a lot of other helping professions and industries.
So what are some tips or tricks you would share about, sort of, we talked through when you recognize it, what can you do to help yourself if you recognize it yourself, or other people through it?
So one of the things that's really important is making sure that we identify people that are at risk, because people that are at risk are people that we can help sooner and quicker. People that are at risk are, of course, critical care personnel. They have the highest rates of burnout, which is the syndrome that that leads to and progresses to compassion fatigue. People that are really empathetic, the empaths, are really at higher risk because they have a harder time detaching and becoming depersonalizing, which is sort of a shield, but it's also a symptom um, of compassion fatigue. People that are really exposed to deaths, traumas, high stress environments, longer work days, difficult patients, pressures from patients' families. I think that's getting to be, that's something that I notice more and more with the people that I work with, is that they are getting a lot of patients, families pressuring them about different things. And then conflicts, of course, with other staff members. So once we know and identify the people that are at risk, we can really move into the strategies that can help. So for individual people, these are all the things that everybody knows that they need to do for keeping yourself healthy, but these are real things that help with reducing risk for compassion fatigue. So regular exercise, healthy eating, adequate rest, time off, setting emotional boundaries, limits on what you could do for others, engage in hobbies. And of course, if you feel it's needed or you think you would benefit, you could go to do some therapy. And so for the workplace, I think it's important for leaders in every workplace environment that that have people that are in these helping professions. So we want to make sure that we boost our resiliency training and provide training that helps people become more resilient. And that comes really after identifying people who are at risk. So we want to teach about the fatigue. We want to teach about the risk factors, relaxation techniques, and build support networks at work. There's a lot of informal support networks. Everybody knows that they have their buddies they can talk to and people they go to. And a lot of organizations don't have formal support networks. Bigger organizations have employee assistance programs, such as the organization that I work for. And that's really has been beneficial for people. There's always support groups that you can create in the workplace. And I think when we went through COVID, I think we had informal support groups. They sometimes started at 5 o'clock somewhere. So those are helpful. Make sure people can get their regular breaks. And I think it's really important for leaders to do regular check-ins and rounding with their teams and make sure that they're, just checking in what's going well with your day, what's not working with your day, and be prepared to help them with some on-site counseling. And then, of course, there's the work environment. I always talk about when you're having a lot of stress, it's one little thing in your work environment can put you over the edge, and I call that the pebbles in your shoes. So as leaders, we want to make sure that we identify what are the pebbles in our people's shoes. If it's continual software program glitches, if it's somebody always being late for work, and then you have to carry their fair share, so we can make sure that everybody on the team is being accountable, and remove the pebbles in their shoes. So those are the things we can do from a workplace environment. And then individual things are really about keeping yourself healthy and well and recognizing what's going on.
All right. Well,
Great.
that was really super helpful. I think it's really important for people to, you know, even some of the conversations I think that I've had with just friends who aren't in the helping industry, who, you know, with everything that's going on with COVID, I mean, I think we're all a little bit tired as far as compassion fatigue goes. And so really listening for those cues, you know, the things people say, the body language, and it, you know, even if, you know, I think about like parents who have young kids at home, who have been at home and working and trying to entertain their kids and all the things, you know, they're exhausted. And so I think really thinking about, you know, we all are pretty good about saying, oh, well, we're all tired, or, oh, well, we're all burned out. Well, that might be true, but not everybody processes it the same way. So really keeping an eye on the people that are giving you the sort of high sign, like whether they mean to or not, hey, I'm not doing really good over here. So I think listening.
It's a hard one, because it's not like when you're rounding, you can't walk around and say, do you have chronic fatigue? I'm concerned. Do you have chronic fatigue? I mean, you don't ask people that. You really can ask things like, what's working well, what's not. Another thing that's really interesting is, since COVID, and at my work, everybody is still wearing masks when we're in public spaces. And, you know, I'm sure you know this, Meg, 38% of our communication is with our faces. And so when you've got it covered up to here, and when you're talking to people and you're trying to figure out, like, are you okay? Are you not okay? And sometimes I want to say, can you pull your mask down? I really want to see how you're doing. Because it's hard to really see how people are doing when they've got 3/4 of their face covered up, since we communicate so much with our faces. Yeah. So I think that's something that we as leaders need to be cognizant of that too.
Yeah. I didn't think about that face thing.
Yeah.
I know I hope you choke on your next meal and I'm smiling at you to be nice. Eyes are the same. So you wouldn't know.
Yeah. Your poker eyes.
Yeah. Okay, well, to all of you who are listening, if you have any other questions or thoughts that you want us to cover about compassion fatigue generally, or in the healthcare industry or helping industries specifically, let us know. Happy to have Peggy on again as a guest, or we can always have a recorded video and we can put it in the group. So if you have any stories or tips or tricks for other people who are struggling with compassion fatigue or burnout, please feel free to share them. We're all always learning all the time.
Yeah. So if anybody specifically would like to get a hold of me, Meg has my contact information. And so feel free to share that with everybody, Meg.
Yeah.
Not publicly, privately, please. But
yes. We'll do DM
Very
me.
good. Well, thanks so much for having me. It was fun. Great.
Yes. Thanks for joining us in the IX Leadership Group. And until next time, lead powerfully, change the world. See you next week.
Bye.